Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves, is ready to go. Talking to people you want to know. Face to face, one on one. Get the story and have some fun with Rhett Palmer.
And now, the most trusted name in radio, Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves.
All right, we have an important Zoom call from Tallahassee, and he's been on about at least 5 times. You've been on the show. Bill Herrle. He, of course, is the executive director for the National Federation of Independent Business. Good morning, Bill. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for having me from your state's capital in Tallahassee.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. A lot going on here. You said there's some things going on up there. Objectively, we were talking before we went on air that will affect voter turnout. We mentioned the marijuana issue. Of course, officially, NFIB has no, no opinion on this. But just objectively, you said it may affect voter turnout. I mean, and I said to you, I said, well, it's inevitable that marijuana is going to be legalized for recreational use. And you said, not necessarily so.
Yeah, well, National Federation of Independent Business represents independent small business owners. And I do need to say, NFIB has not taken a position on this amendment yet. It was just got its final go signal from the Florida Supreme Court. So it will be on the ballot. Voters will have the chance to vote on recreational marijuana in Florida, joining, I think, at least 25 other states. But don't forget that Florida has a higher bar than most states. We need 60% of the vote plus one. And that's not a given on this one. In fact, I don't think there are any other states where recreational marijuana has been on the ballot where it passed by that high of amount. Now, it might have passed constitutionally, but by a lower bar. So, Florida's turning pretty. We'll think these things through, and every Floridian will make their choice, but I don't think there's a guarantee that one will pass because of the higher bar. And I think most political wags in Tallahassee, when they assess how it will affect voter turnout, most people think it's a bit of a wash. That issue tends to be all over the place. Your party designation doesn't necessarily drive people's opinions on that. But the other constitutional amendment that was got the go signal from the Florida Supreme Court was the guaranteeing access to abortion, highly volatile issue. And I super underscore that NFIB has no business and will not be taking a position on that. That's a deeply personal issue for every voter. And however, operating in the body politic, one has to consider how that will affect the overall election, and because we'll be looking at supporting many legislative candidates in Florida, we have to sit back and ask ourselves how that's going to affect voter turnout. And of course, indications is that it will drive Democratic votes. So there's some closer looking that needs to happen to all the races as that turnout effect filters down to lower legislative races. And we've got to assess how that's going to impact things. Florida's being called a ruby red state now. If you notice, that's mostly that's coming from people outside of Florida. Those of us that have lived here and have seen elections know that that can't be taken. That should never be taken for granted.
No, because I have a
So
friend of mine, former sheriff of Indian River County. I was on the phone with him. He now has a beautiful home in Tennessee, but he has had a summer home for, I don't know, 20 years up in New York State. He just sold it. I said, why? He said, because in New York State, if they have another COVID, they can actually, first of all, they can, I guess they can seize your house, but this they definitely can do. They can take you and put you in a camp, an interim camp. I mean, it's like communism 101. It's getting really wacky up there in that state. I mean, that's my state, by the way. That's where I was born and raised in Poughkeepsie, and then Albany, Schenectady, Troy.
yeah,
And I knew the original Cuomo. I got to meet him as in my early 20s, and I actually liked Cuomo. And of course, when I was when I was 16, I was a member of Student for a Democratic Society, so I was all Democratic. It's funny you said about the marijuana issue, Democratic. I'm not sure if that's as strong as it used to be. Unless I'm wrong, um, I tell you, I do not indulge in marijuana. I do not drink, but I think I would rather have somebody coming at me at night that was stoned on marijuana as opposed to alcohol, because they might get pulled over for driving too slow, as opposed. And
well, it is. It'll get you a DUI just the same.
well, it's like going to an Irish wake. I mean, it's bound to be a fight. Well, you put those same people in the marijuana, and everybody's sitting around saying, "Oh, so you got any more sandwiches?"
Well,
Anyway, but
times they are changing, Rhett. There's no sense standing in the road of progress, if that's what you want to call it.
the times they
But
are a changing. Well, I had a guy on my show. You want to hear something terrifying? I had a guy on my
mhm.
show. This old white guy. He spent 31 years 31 years imprisoned for selling marijuana.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how to react to that.
He was a dealer back,
We
I
don't
guess, in
want
the 60s or 70s. I mean, they took 31 years of this man's life for selling a weed.
wow.
So anyway, who knows what'll happen? But
Well, a lot of
31 years in
changes coming
prison.
ahead for the justice
Let's
system.
let's get to talking about what you'd like to talk about. Bill Herrle, of course, is the executive director for the National Federation of Independent Business and judicial hellholes. Okay, Florida was listed on the annual judicial for a couple of decades. Judicial hellholes
Yeah.
produced by the American Tort Reform Association, little by little, under the leadership of Governor DeSantis. That has begun to change. Lawsuit reform package, and our state is no longer listed as a judicial hellhole. Why? What has changed, Bill?
Well, yesterday's news, but last year, the Florida legislature passed just a titanic tort reform bill that those advocates like us at NFIB, representing small business owners,
Mm-hmm.
have been asking for literally for decades. Rhett. All that time, we were sitting in the bottom rung of states for judicial environment, for litigation environment. The ideas, stacked up of various alternatives we would propose here and there, only to get nowhere. Finally, we had the right dynamic of a very strong pro lawsuit abuse reform Senate president in the form of Kathleen Pasadoma and House Speaker and Paul Renner. And then that final secret ingredient, a governor who is very strong on the issue, supporting free enterprise and supporting lawsuit abuse reform, who also was looking to step out on the national stage. And once all those things were in place, we passed a bill that's now being talked about nationwide, across business interests in various states. It's being sampled in other legislatures now for being one of the strongest lawsuit abuse reform bills in the nation. And what we were looking for was really just trying to even the scales. We think what we advocated was moderate. It's just that Florida became so extreme that litigation has become an industry in and of itself. One needs only to hop in their car and drive a couple exits down any interstate in Florida to see that if you judged it by the saturation of billboards, you'd think that litigation is the biggest industry in the state.
Yeah, it's
Well, we know
crazy.
better. Yeah.
You know, my dad was
The
an
industry.
attorney, and back then you could not advertise. It was considered beneath you to advertise.
Well, those are the good old days, and they ain't coming back, Rhett. But they used to call them tombstone ads. You ever hear that term?
No.
All lawyers could do is what they'd call a tombstone ad, which was basically their name and their address and the fact that they were a practicing attorney and maybe a phone number.
How did that ever
name, date,
change?
serial number.
How do you go? You know, because I wonder about this.
And there was I can't cite it now. There was a U.S. Supreme Court decision. I think it came down in the mid to late 70s, or maybe early, yeah, in the late 70s. That basically, I think the premises was separation of powers and freedom of speech. But what it did was it opened the barn door, and one of the first horses out of the gate was our good citizen friend from Florida, John Morgan. Part of his genius is I think he recognized that right away, and he was one of the first to really recognize the power of advertising in law practice. And look where he is now for it. I'm sure everyone knows, largest law firm in the world.
Yeah, it's crazy. Had my father lived, I lost him in a car accident the day before my 5th birthday. But had he continued on, he had a very successful practice by the time he was in his 30s, and that's when we lost him. But he might have gone. He wanted to be a judge. My mom said. Well, what do you think about this thing out? This is just a little conjecture on your part. I mean, but this $20 an hour, minimum wage out in California. Now, what's bad about that? First of all, it's just like no one is not cognizant that it's going to cost you $30 for a Big Mac out there. But the point is that it's just. First of all, it is unjust. And if I was an attorney and it wouldn't cost me any money to hire an attorney, I might sue the state out there if I was a restaurant owner, because it's only for the restaurants. How do you segregate and say it's only for the restaurants? Like my show here, if I was in California, I could pay $10, $15 an hour, but you have to pay $20 an hour. This is unfair to the. Why are they picking on the restaurant? Don't they have a good restaurant association?
It's headlines like that make me wake up, and thank God I don't have my same job in the state of California, because what an uphill push it must be being trying to defend small business owners in a state like that. But it's really tragic news for small business owners, and of course, restaurant and hospitality is such a important and strong small business sector. So for so many people, it's their first attempt at free enterprise, and to be saddled with a $20 minimum wage.
It's crazy. Now listen to this.
It's just catastrophic.
What do you think about our neighbors are runners down here in Florida? They're runners. They were going to go up to New York for the big run, whatever that thing is they do over the bridge and everything. Anyway, so New York City now. Some dummy said, hey, we can make a little extra money. We're going to charge everybody that participates $15 to run over the bridge. So our neighbors are not going to go. So our neighbors are not going to be renting an expensive hotel room with the hotel taxes for the city for those 5 days. They're not going to be going to the New York City restaurants. What schlemiels. These people are not business people. It's just like Ronnie Reagan said. He said, Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Hang up on them. It's the most dangerous phone call you ever get. Hello, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Oh my God, they don't know what they're doing. They have no responsibility,
What they lose sight of is you can regulate and you control business, but you just can't control what that consumer is going to do with that money in his wallet. and that is not going to break. That part of the market is not going to break. It's going to react in rational terms, and people are going to ask themselves real hard questions about really whether that cheeseburger is worth $20 to buy at that moment in that time.
Well, what worries me
So
is the vortex, because now you're a few years younger than me, so maybe you don't remember this, but we had a sugar shortage. It was probably not a legitimate sugar shortage. I think Fidel Castro initiated, because we get a lot of our sugar from Cuba. And I remember that Wrigley Spearmint gum was a nickel. Okay, a Reese's peanut butter cup was a nickel as I grew up, because I'd get done with school and I'd get my Schwinn bike and I'd go to the little pharmacy and I'd get my Wrigley Spearmint gum and I'd get my either a chocolate chunky for a nickel, or I'd get a Reese's. Anyway, excuse me. When we had the sugar shortage, the Wrigley Spearmint gum went up to 50 cents. Now, Bill, you and I have a bubble gum company together. Now we're making a nickel on a pack. Now we're making 10 times that, 50 cents, because of the sugar, right? Now the sugar comes back. We're figuring, hey man, I mean, we made 10 million the year before. This year we made 100 million. We're not going to buy. They're paying the money. Why should we lower the price? And it's just so to today, you can't get gum for a nickel. You can't even get it for 50 cents now. It's like $3 for a package.
You got to tell me when the price went from a nickel to 50 cents, your gum buying habits had to change.
But they don't. I want it. I want it. You know.
Well, obviously you were a rich kid, Rhett.
No, no.
You were driving a Schwinn bicycle, man. That's the Cadillac of bicycle.
Is it really?
I was stuck on a hand-me-down Huffy. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I was a shoe shine boy. Do I get any points for that?
What was your hourly wage then?
I think I got 10 cents a pair. Oh, but I did do something that might impress you. We were members of a golf club, because actually there was an affluence at that point. IBM is in the town Poughkeepsie. And we happened to live in a suburban area where there was a little set of woods, about 3 times the size of this room, right? And so I would go over to the 13th tee off. I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I took all the milk bottles, and I would buy 10 cans of lemonade for $10. Well, by the time they got to the 14th or 13th tee off there, these guys are willing to pay anything. So minimum wage was $1.30 an hour. I'm 9 years of age. Okay, if you were a man and you worked 10 hours, you'd make out $13 a day. Okay, for hard labor or blue collar, right? I was making $30 a day on Saturday and Sunday selling lemonade. This wasn't any little like, give me 3 cents and let's pretend that I have a lemonade stand. This was,
you got a backup plan if this radio business doesn't work out for you, right?
I bought my first motion picture camera like Steven Spielberg. I got a Super 8 when I was 9.
Get out.
Yeah, it's true story, true story.
Show us some of those films. Show us the early film catalog of Rhett Palmer.
You know, I have those somewhere. They might be interesting to see, you know.
I think your fan base would love to see those.
That'd be fun. So anyway, let's talk about this though. So the good thing is the lawsuit reform package, and the state is no longer listed. Florida is no longer listed as a judicial hellhole. However, we're still a state on the watch list, and that's not good. The third-party lawsuit financing issue and medical malpractice. Let's talk about that.
Well, there was so much activity last year, and let's face it, the legislature was very eager to help build up Governor DeSantis's profile, and they succeeded in that. And we were the beneficiaries of that, in that they finally did pass this huge tort reform package. There wasn't a lot left on the table, but we found that this year, when the legislature reconvened, and of course the governor returned from the campaign trail back to Tallahassee, there was just mm, they accomplished so much last year that there wasn't a whole lot left on the table. And I'm not talking about just about tort. I'm talking about a lot of policy areas where they moved the ball several steps ahead last year. And so this year was a very, unproductive is a kind word. But lackluster. Let me say just lackluster legislative session on across a lot of issues. Lower number of bills passed. No super controversial issues grabbing all the headlines, driving busloads of people to Tallahassee. Every couple of decades, we'll take a session like that. But it left some things on the table. In tort reform, we had an important issue that we wanted to have included last year, aired it out again this year, got nowhere on it, and again in this legislature that was, trying to get their feet underneath them again. And that was third-party litigation financing. I think we've talked to you about this.
Explain
before,
that
Rhett.
again, would you?
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. And the more that people, as soon as people learn that this is happening in our litigation system, they say, well, we gotta get our arms around this because this is not my perception of justice. But basically, you think of a lawsuit and you have two parties, right? You have the defendant and you have the plaintiff. In litigation financing, there emerges a third party who remains invisible to the judge, invisible to any jury, and that is a person who invests in the through the plaintiff on the outcome of the case. And so it happens in very small cases. It happens in very, very large cases. But let's just take a simple example of, let's say, you slip and fall at a business and you file a lawsuit and someone finds out about this and they contact you and they say, Rhett, you're going to court and you might get $50,000 award, but you don't know that for sure. But today, I'll be glad to write you a check for $25,000, and you can go cash it today. A lot of people will take that offer, but guess what? When you do that, that person has basically bought the rights to your lawsuit, and if it comes out positive, if the award is for more than $25,000, they're going to reap the profit. And they skin this cat 20 different ways and basically take advantage of plaintiffs' natural inclination to take a bird in the hand or then two in the bush, and basically they're taking a tremendous advantage of injured parties out there. And what we're saying is we'd like the practice to end. I mean, we'd like to stop it. But before this industry gets out of hand, at the very least, we've been asking the legislature to shine a bright light on it, to make sure that when this happens in a case, that the defendant knows that there's a third party who's going to really take benefit from the award, that the judge knows, that the jury knows, and maybe even put some caps on how much interest they can charge a plaintiff, because sometimes they play that game too. They say, okay, you might get $50,000 out of this lawsuit. We know you need the money now. How about we lend it to you? And there's actually no limit on the interest that they can charge that plaintiff on those loans.
Isn't that against
some
the
of
law?
those loans we found out have 30 to 40% interest rates.
Isn't that against the law? No.
No, it is not against the law. All kinds of interest is regulated in other areas of commerce, but not in this almost largely unregulated industry. So it's attracting a lot of flies.
Just this week, I had a guy sitting right here. He was converted to Jesus 7 years ago, but before that, he was in the mafia. And he said, "You come to me, you borrow $10,000." So they keep you on the hook. You have to pay that, and you have to pay this other percentage. And sometimes they would strong arm you and say, "We're going to charge you 3 times the $10,000. And if you don't do it, we'll break your arms." I mean, it's when you deal with the devil, man. There are people there. You know what amazes me is it's a lot of things you were talking about today. I'm thinking, I'm not naturally given to guile. I'd like to think a lot of people there are not, but maybe that's because I'm not given to guile. But it astounds me how some people that we've been talking about today, they don't have scruples. And if they did have scruples, they belonged to somebody else and they stole those too. The point being that they go into it, and which is if you're going to be bad, don't be half bad. A guy like me, see, I could never rob banks like those people that just got the $30 million out west. I'd be caught. I can't do things. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the deception. It's kind of like if you're going to be a really good homicidal cop, you got to really be able to think like a thief or think like a murderer, but make some sort of a moral decision. You're on the side of good, but what?
We're determined to give these people some scruples, whether they want them or not.
Good for you.
Because it is a very, and I don't want to wax too emotional about it, but someone's got to protect Lady Justice, and what this is becoming, it's kind of, it's making a joke of our justice system because it's basically allowing people to, investment is one thing, but they're gambling.
What happened to good sense?
On the outcome of our justice system, and they're taking advantage of plaintiffs along the way, and it is a totally unregulated business. So we find, we're a little disappointed that the legislature didn't get this across the finish line. And of course, the people that are in this industry, what happens when you have a confiscatory business model? You got a lot of money, and when the legislature wants to threaten it, you've got a lot of resources to push back, and we saw them pushing back very strongly on this bill that, frankly, was only a mild half step to put a very modest cap on the interest rate they can charge, and to do a few measures to have some transparency.
But has common sense taken lead? Because small businesses and big business people just don't think about this alike. Must factor in the cost of litigation and everything they do. The more frivolous and random the lawsuits are, the less predictability there is for the business model, and so they have to charge all this extra money. It is just what happened to common sense.
Well,
I don't know.
It's not invisible though, Rhett. Anyone can see this. Right in their own home. What do? You buy you buy a product at the store. You come home with it, and I don't know. Let's pick something ridiculous. You buy rat poison, and there's a warning label on it that says not for human consumption. Well, I think most of us understand that. The coddling of common sense is apparent in all of our society, and why do you have those ridiculous warning labels that we all laugh at sometimes when we see them on products?
You know what I think? I think the tail.
Every one of them is. Go ahead.
The tail is wagging the dog, and sometimes I'm really beginning to think a lot of these people do this because they either are filled with inferiority, they don't have an honest program with themselves in life, and so they can't be honest. They're jealous of everybody else. So what they do is they like the attention. They just want to go against. They don't even know why. If you interview these people, you got whatever. We won't go into that whole thing. We are running out of time today because I wanted to talk about squatters, but some other time. These squatters, they're finally changing the law on these squatters. What happened to common sense, for crying out loud? I do want to say this, and this is of a more of a sober nature. the president of the Senate,
Mhm.
Catherine, how do you pronounce her last name?
Kathleen Pasadoma.
Sad
Yeah,
story. Tell,
Pasadoma.
tell. I mean, she was looking forward. You said she would speak of her husband frequently and looking forward to retirement and spending quality time with him. What happened?
Yeah, it's so tragic. The Senate President Kathleen Pasadoma's husband tragically died hiking in Bryce Canyon, Utah. Of course, they were together on a vacation, and I've seen a lot of leaders come and go from Tallahassee. Rhett, Kathleen Pasadoma, who just finished her term, well, her service as Senate President, was one of the better liked leaders we've seen. Just a fine woman who had a lot of dignity, charming and friendly, always engaged, willing to talk to people. And you always look at legislative leaders. What's their next step? Do they want to go from Senate president to United States senator? What's their ambition? And one thing I always, a lot of people admired about Kathleen Pasadoma is she said, no, this is fine for me. I'm going to finish this Florida legislature up, and I'm going to. She always talked about going out and spending more time with her husband, and just so sad and tragic for many people in Tallahassee
Yeah.
who know Kathleen Pasadoma well. That at this time in her life when she could really look forward to it, has tragically lost her husband. So
Yeah,
our hearts go out to her.
yeah. Well, listen, we are out of time, and Bill Herrle, of course, is the executive director of the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Do you have a website if anybody wants to broach the subject and more in depth with you and your organization?
The National Federation of Independent Business has been around for 75 years and advocates for small business owners and small business owners only. So we can be found online at nfib.org. And we love to have small business owners find us and engage. We are the pointy end of the sword that makes a difference for them in the nation's capital and every state capital.
Bill Herrle, have a wonderful, peaceful weekend. And
You too, Rhett.
thanks for the quality time you've given us today. I know you're a busy guy, but I really appreciate it. All right.
Thanks. Always good to spend time with you.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Hey, this is the mayor of the airwaves looking out for you. Who loves you, baby?